My phone buzzed with a message from Matilda Crowley, the bank investigator I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Alex, we need your cooperation. Let me know when you're free." I stared at the screen in my small Seattle apartment, my heart pounding. The word cooperation stung. Cooperating meant turning on my own family. And yet, I'd spent the past 3 years as the overlooked nephew in my uncle's hospitality empire, privy to whispered strategies and hidden ledgers, forever dismissed as irrelevant. I ran a hand through my dark hair, recalling every family gathering at the Harborview Resort, where I'd lingered in doorways, eavesdropping as executives joked about shifting cash between coastal inns to keep the numbers rosy. As the official black sheep, I was ushered out of boardrooms before critical discussions began. I knew their secrets better than any insider. I bought a coffee from my favourite corner shop and sat by the window, watching rain smear the city's neon reflections on the wet pavement. Matilda's text pinged again. "Please." I pictured her as a lifeline, someone whose investigation would stall without my testimony. But speaking out would devastate my uncle's reputation and tear my family apart. And staying silent could destroy me. I opened my laptop and drafted a reply. "I'll come in tomorrow morning." My finger hovered over send. I thought about the loan guarantee I'd signed 3 years ago at Uncle Thomas's insistence, when he'd framed it as a procedural formality. He'd presented it as a gesture of family solidarity. Now it felt like a noose tightening around my neck. A knock at the door jolted me. It was Jorge, my college friend, and now a software developer. His easy grin vanished when he saw my face. "Alex, you okay?" he asked. I handed him my phone. He read the text and let out a low whistle. "You've got to be kidding me." I sank onto my worn couch. "I don't know what to do, Jorge." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Think about yourself. You're the guarantor. This is your fight now. They can't bury it without you." I exhaled, rain pattering against the glass. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into a sterile meeting room at Seabourn Bank, not as family, but as someone who could topple an empire with the truth. I realized my life was about to change forever. The next morning, I waited in the lobby of Seabourn Bank at exactly 9:30, my palm slick against the briefcase handle. I watched pale sunlight filter through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating rows of chairs where other clients sat scrolling on their phones. My heart thundered as Matilda appeared in a charcoal grey suit, clipboard in hand. "Alex Navarro?" she asked, extending her hand. I nodded and followed her down a hallway lined with portraits of past bank presidents. The air smelled faintly of machine polish and recycled coffee. She led me into a windowless conference room where 2 men in crisp shirts and ties sat behind a long polished table. One introduced himself as Carter Nguyen, the bank's legal counsel. The other, a quiet man named Peter Lowe, handled compliance. They offered me bottled water, and I apologized for my racing pulse. "Thank you for coming," Matilda began. "We have reason to believe that Crowley Resorts has been manipulating its financials to secure loans under false pretenses. You, as a guarantor on their $30 million line of credit, have standing to access internal documents." She tapped her clipboard. "We need your written statement and any records you can provide." I swallowed. "I know about the transfers between properties. I have screenshots of emails where they instructed managers to move cash to keep certain locations looking healthy before audits." Carter leaned forward. "Can you produce those emails and any supporting ledgers?" "I saved them on a flash drive," I said, pulling it from my pocket. "And I have notes from board meetings. unofficial minutes I took when I was asked to step out of the room. They assume I'm irrelevant, so I was never confronted about it, Peter jotted furiously. This is invaluable. You understand that by sharing these documents, you're risking your relationship with your uncle and the rest of your family. I nodded. Yes, but if I don't, I'll be liable for that loan myself. I can't stand by and watch him sacrifice me as collateral. Matilda offered a small supportive smile. We'll protect you as best we can. The bank has non-retaliation policies for guarantors, and you're legally entitled to this information. After we review your evidence, we'll prepare formal demands for Crowley Resorts to produce all financial records. They'll have 30 days to comply. I exhaled, a knot in my chest loosening slightly. What happens if they refuse? Carter's tone darkened. We'll seek a court injunction to freeze assets and compel disclosure. If they violate court orders, they'll face contempt charges. Our priority is preventing further concealment or dissipation of assets. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. They would use the law. I would use the documents I'd risked my career collecting. But doubt crept in. Could I really betray my uncle so completely? Was I just trading one form of exile for another? Matilda nodded at Carter. Carter will draft the demand letter. Peter and I will coordinate with you on the statement. Alex, we know this is hard. You're doing the right thing. As I left the bank, clutching a copy of the engagement letter we'd signed, the cool morning air felt electric. I dialed Jorge. I did it, I said, voice trembling with relief and fear. It started. His quiet reassurance on the other end steadied me. I'm proud of you, Alex. We'll get through this. I hung up and walked toward the street, each step echoing in my mind. Truth or silence, loyalty or survival. I had chosen truth, and there was no turning back. That evening, I returned to my apartment, thinly veiled as routine. I brewed tea, scrolled social media, and pretended nothing had changed. But the weight of my actions pressed on my chest like a solid block. I glanced at the flash drive on my desk, every incriminating email, ledger extract, and scribbled note I had amassed. Tomorrow, the bank lawyers would deliver their formal request to Crowley Resorts. I knew exactly how my uncle would react. My phone buzzed, a text from a blocked number. Stop what you're doing. Meet me tonight. Pier 58, shipping container at the north end. Come alone. No signature. No explanation. My pulse spiked. It could be a trap orchestrated by my uncle's aides, or Tom Reynolds, the former resort manager I'd privately contacted days ago. Tom had promised to share more proof if I could meet discreetly. I debated replying. Then I texted, I'll be there. At 9 o'clock, under a steel grey sky, I trudged along Elliott Bay's waterfront. The wind cut through my jacket, carrying the briny tang of seaweed. Pier 58 loomed ahead, its weathered planks echoing under my boots. At the far end, a row of shipping containers stood, rusted and silent. I spotted the container with a faded blue arrow, spray-painted on its side. Tom's signal. I approached, heart hammering. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, dim light filtered through grated vents, casting latticed shadows. A wooden crate served as a makeshift table. Atop it, several manila folders lay spread. Behind the crate stood a tall figure in a dark hoodie. Alex, he said, voice low but familiar. He pulled back the hood to reveal greying hair and sharp eyes. Tom Reynolds. "Thank you for meeting me," I whispered, stepping closer. He nodded. "I've risked everything to get you these." He tapped the folders. "Remember those odd inventory transfers you heard about? Here are the vehicle movement logs, detailed entries showing exactly which cars moved between 5 Crowley resorts and when. And here," he handed me a folder, "are emails between your uncle and his CFO discussing offshore account setups in the British Virgin Islands." My breath caught. Offshore accounts. This is unbelievable. Tom's lips tightened. "That's not all." He pulled out a sealed envelope stamped confidential. "This is a draft of your uncle's contingency plan, dated 6 months ago, laying out how to sever you legally and spin any guarantee liability onto you as a scapegoat. He got the idea from a law firm in New York." I flipped through the pages, stomach twisting. My uncle had planned my ruin for months. No wonder he publicly humiliated me at the board retreat. He needed plausible deniability and a fall guy. "Where did you get all this?" I asked, Tom's jaw clenched. "I was his operations manager in Bellingham. I found these records when I took over the airport branch. When I confronted him, they threatened to ruin my career. I walked away with copies before they could delete anything." I swallowed. "This is ironclad." He leaned forward. "You have to move quickly. Once the bank serves their demand letter, your uncle will scramble to hide assets and silence witnesses. If you don't lodge this evidence with Matilda and Carter, he'll use his influence to stifle the investigation." I nodded, steeling myself. "I'll deliver these to the bank legal team first thing in the morning. Thank you, Tom." "You've saved me." He gave a small, wry smile. "Just make sure justice is served." We left the container separately, me blending into the darkened pier, Tom slipping away toward the city's edge. The cold night air stung my lungs as I walked home, clutching the folders like a lifeline. Back in my apartment, I organised everything on my desk. The flash drive, the new folders, the confidential draft. Matilda's meeting replayed in my mind, and I realised how pivotal tomorrow would be. With this level of evidence, Crowley Resorts had no choice but to comply, or face court-ordered asset freezes and contempt charges. Sleep eluded me. The files lay open on my desk as I stared at the ceiling, mind buzzing with possibilities. Tomorrow, I would step into Matilda's office again, no longer just a reluctant guarantor, but the keeper of the ultimate proof. And this time, there would be no turning back. My journey to dismantle my uncle's empire had truly begun. The dawn light crept through my blinds, nudging me from a restless half-sleep. I sat up, the weight of last night's revelations settling in my chest. The folders lay neatly arranged on my desk. Vehicle logs, CFO emails, the confidential contingency plan. I paused, staring at the final draft, my uncle's own words outlining how to shift liability onto me. This was the concrete proof Matilda needed. By 8 o'clock, I was in the lobby of my building, briefcase in hand, the folders secured inside. My reflection in the glass doors looked gaunter than usual. Dark circles under my eyes, a hard, set jaw. But my shoulders were squared, determined. I pressed the buzzer for Matilda's extension and hurried into the elevator. When I stepped off at the bank's 19th floor, Matilda was waiting outside her office, scanning the hallway for me. Her expression softened when she saw the folders. "Alex, good. Come in," she said, opening the door. Inside, Carter and Peter were already seated, the polished conference table cleared. I placed the folders between them. These are the documents Tom Reynolds gave me. The vehicle movement logs, emails about offshore transfers, and the contingency plan drafted by your uncle's legal team. My voice was steady but firm. Carter flipped through the logs. These timestamps match exactly with the discrepancies we noted in the public filings. And these emails, he tapped the page, confirm the offshore accounts. Peter pulled out his pen. With these, we can amend our demand letter to include the new evidence. Crowley Resorts will have less ground to stall. Matilda looked at me, gratitude shining in her tired eyes. Thank you, Alex. This changes everything. We'll send an amended demand today and begin preparations for an asset freeze order. I nodded. What about the contingency plan? It's direct proof of intent to defraud and to sacrifice me as the guarantor. Carter steepled his fingers. We'll forward that to the district attorney's office. It demonstrates not only fraudulent intent, but also obstruction of justice. They'll likely open a criminal inquiry parallel to our civil action. A swell of relief washed over me. Finally, I wasn't alone in this. They had the resources and authority to use my evidence effectively. But another thought surfaced. Time. How soon do we serve? I asked. Matilda consulted her notes. We'll issue the amended demand by close of business. Crowley Resorts has 30 days to comply, but given the gravity of these documents, we'll petition for an expedited hearing. I'd estimate we could get a preliminary injunction within 2 weeks. I exhaled. And in that time, Uncle Thomas can't move assets or threaten witnesses. Correct, Peter confirmed. If he tries, he risks contempt and additional charges. We'll also issue protective orders for you and any witnesses, like Tom. My mind flashed to Tom, slipping away into the night. I owed him everything, but I also worried about his safety. Will Tom be notified of the protective order? I asked. Matilda nodded. Yes, we'll arrange it. No one will touch him now. She paused, folding her hands. Alex, you've shown incredible courage. I know this is painful, betraying your family like this, but you've done the right thing for yourself, your creditors, even the honest employees who thought they worked for a reputable company. Her words struck a chord. I'd feared I'd betrayed my uncle. In reality, I was saving everyone trapped in his web of lies. Thank you, I said quietly. I just want the truth to come out. Matilda offered me a reassuring smile. And it will. Now, let's get these filings in motion. As I left the bank, the morning sun felt warmer than before. The path ahead would be brutal. Court battles, media scrutiny, family fallout. But with the law and irrefutable proof on my side, I felt a quiet confidence. Today, I had become more than a guarantor in a fraudulent scheme. I was the catalyst for accountability and justice. And that realization propelled me forward, ready to face whatever came next. That afternoon, as I sat in my apartment, editing a news clipping from the Puget Sound Business Journal, investigation launched against Crowley Resorts, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. My stomach tightened. Alex Navarro? A cool, measured voice asked. I recognized the accent immediately. My mother's secretary. Miss Navarro, she began, Mrs. Ellis Crowley would like to speak with you. My heart pounded. I hadn't heard from my mother since I told her I would cooperate with the bank. I steeled myself and agreed to her request. 15 minutes later, I made my way to her home in Queen Anne, the neighbourhood's tidy houses and tree-lined streets, feeling oddly normal after the day's chaos. She greeted me at the door, impeccably dressed in a tailored blouse and slacks. Her courteous smile didn't reach her eyes. "Alex, thank you for coming," she said, leading me into a sunlit living room overlooking Elliott Bay. I sat, palms resting on my briefcase. My mother poured tea, set a cup before me, and sat across with a composed posture. "Alex," she began, voice soft but firm, "your cooperation with the bank has caused quite a stir. Your uncle insists you've been misled and that you're making false allegations." She sighed as though burdened by her own words. "I'm here to ask you, please reconsider. Your uncle is distraught. He's worried about you more than the business." I met her gaze. "He's worried about me? He drafted a plan to frame me. He publicly disowned me before I even knew anything about the loan default." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That was a misunderstanding, an emotional outburst. Your uncle cares deeply for you." I shook my head. "If that's true, why hide emails about offshore accounts? Why move assets behind everyone's back?" Her expression flickered, irritation quickly replaced by composure. "Those are complex financial decisions. I'm not sure you understand the full picture." I leaned forward. "Explain it to me then." "Because right now, the bank has everything it needs to freeze all Crowley assets. The courts will grant the injunction, and your family's empire will collapse if Uncle Thomas doesn't comply." She placed her teacup down. "You don't know what you're risking. There are reputations at stake. Your own." "I've already lost my reputation," I said quietly. "The only thing I can protect now is the truth." She stood abruptly. "I see I cannot dissuade you." Her voice tremored with emotion. "Very well. But know this, Alex. When everything falls apart, you'll bear the guilt of a broken family and ruined livelihoods." She swept from the room, leaving me alone with the bay view and the hum of passing cars. I felt no guilt, only resolve. The truth was a difficult path, but it was the only one I could walk. Back at my desk that evening, I reviewed new messages from Matilda. The bank had filed the amended demand and secured an immediate freeze on Crowley's principal accounts. Crowley Resorts had 24 hours to comply before contempt proceedings. I forwarded my mother's words to her and Carter. Late that night, I called Jorge. "My mother tried to guilt-trip me," I said, weary but determined. "They're scrambling, but the freeze is in place." He was quiet for a moment. "You did the right thing. Let them try to rebuild on truth, not lies." I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights. For the first time, I felt that I was no longer defined by my uncle's empire. I was writing my own story, one built on integrity and courage. The fight was far from over, but I knew I was ready. A week later, the frost of spring had given way to mild, drizzly mornings, and Seattle felt both familiar and alien as I navigated its wet streets. Crowley Resorts' legal team had filed an emergency motion to dissolve the asset freeze, citing irreparable harm to innocent employees and suppliers. Their brief, however, relied on outdated figures and completely ignored the new evidence of offshore transfers and the contingency plan. Carter Nguyen was confident we'd counter it swiftly. That afternoon, Matilda summoned me to Seabourn Bank's executive suite. The room overlooked Elliott Bay, its large windows offering a panoramic view of ships docked at the piers. She, Carter, and Peter waited around the polished mahogany table, this time joined by an external counsel from the State Attorney General's office, Assistant AG Dana Ruiz. "Alex," Dana began, "thank you for providing the evidence. We've opened a parallel criminal investigation into embezzlement and wire fraud at Crowley Resorts." Her tone was formal, but I detected genuine gratitude. "Your testimony will be critical. We'd like to schedule a deposition next week and issue subpoenas for key executives, including your uncle and CFO." I swallowed, feeling the weight of each step. A criminal investigation meant media coverage, public scrutiny, and, for me, complete estrangement from my family's social circle. But I nodded. "I understand. I'll be ready." Peter passed me a revised timeline of events based on the documents I had provided. The initial redirections of cash, the registration of shell companies in the BVI, and the drafted strategy to scapegoat me. Each bullet point reminded me just how systematic my uncle's fraud had been. Carter added, "Our court date for the injunction is set for the day after tomorrow. We expect Crowley's lawyers to argue technicalities, but with the new evidence, I am confident the judge will keep the freeze in effect." I exhaled. Then, the key is to secure witness statements before anyone can intimidate them. I thought of Tom and wondered if he'd heard about the freeze. Matilda smiled. "We've already issued protective orders for Tom. He's safe. We'll also reach out to your uncle's former CFO, Julia Murray. She expressed concerns about financial irregularities last quarter." As the meeting wrapped, Dana offered me a folder. "This contains information on witness preparation and what to expect in a deposition. Review it at your leisure. And, Alex, thank you for your bravery. You're making a huge difference." Walking back through the lobby, I felt a cautious optimism. The combined efforts of the bank and the state AG meant this was no longer just a civil battle. It was a full-scale legal reckoning. That evening, I visited Julia Murray's office, a downtown law firm in Pioneer Square. She greeted me warmly, though her eyes betrayed nerves. Over chamomile tea in a conference room, she confirmed the patterns in her own records. Unexplained transfers, doubled-up invoices, and a persistent directive from my uncle to keep the books pretty for upcoming audits. "Julia," I said softly, "thank you for coming forward. Your statement could seal the case." She hesitated, then nodded resolutely. "I won't let others suffer because I stayed silent. I'll testify." As I drove home, rain drummed on the windshield, but my mind felt clear. The network of lies was unraveling, one testimony at a time. In choosing truth, I'd faced threats, isolation, and the end of family ties. But I'd also found unexpected allies, people like Tom, Julia, Matilda, and even my own conscience. The next morning, I prepared for my deposition, rehearsing my statements and reviewing folders. A final glance at my phone revealed a text from Jorge. "Proud of you. Keep going." I tapped back. "Thanks. Almost there." The phone slid into my pocket. I stepped outside into the grey dawn, ready to confront my uncle's empire in a courtroom rather than a resort lobby. This was becoming more than a battle for my own salvation. This was justice for every person who'd been betrayed by a man who forgot what family truly meant. And nothing would stop me now. The morning of my deposition dawned crisp and overcast. I arrived at the State Attorney General's office in Belltown just before 9, carrying 2 folders. My personal chronology of events and a separate binder with all supporting documents. The security guard directed me to a secured conference room on the 6th floor. Inside, Assistant AG Dana Ruiz and two of her investigators, Michael Chen and Elena Vasquez, waited with polite nods. Dana stood to greet me. "Alex, thank you for coming. We'll begin shortly. In the meantime, would you like some water?" I shook my head, taking a seat at the long table. My palms felt clammy as Michael laid out the ground rules. "This is on record. We'll ask you to swear to tell the truth. Then we'll move through a series of questions about your role, the loan guarantee, and the documents you provided." Eleanor added, "If at any point you need a break, just let us know." "Take your time." I nodded, closing my eyes for a second to center myself, when Dana opened a legal binder and said, "Alex Navarro, do you solemnly swear to testify truthfully, to the best of your knowledge, under penalty of perjury?" I placed my hand over my heart and replied, "I do." She began with background questions, my relationship to Thomas Crowley, my employment, and how I came to sign the loan guarantee. I answered each clearly, recalling the day Uncle Thomas invited me to the Harborview ballroom, smiling as he presented the paperwork as a gesture of trust. Next, Michael guided us through the emails, looking at Exhibit A, an email dated February 15th of last year, from CFO Julia Murray to you. "Can you summarize its significance?" I flipped to the page. Julia alerted me to a transfer of $2 million from the flagship Seattle property to a shell account. She wrote, "This transfer isn't reflected in our internal budget, and I fear the auditors will notice." Michael nodded. "And you saved this email because I suspected the numbers were being manipulated. I wanted proof in case I ever needed to expose wrongdoing." Eleanor then moved to the inventory logs. "Exhibit B, can you explain the pattern of vehicle movements between Crowley properties?" I pointed to the highlighted dates. "Notice how, every quarter before audit visits, hundreds of cars moved from properties in Tacoma and Bellevue to the Seattle lot, then moved back after the audit. These aren't sales, they're empty transfers designed to inflate collateral." Dana interjected, "So, the intent was to mislead lenders about asset value?" I nodded firmly. "Yes." As the deposition continued, they asked probing questions about the RCM contingency plan. When presented with the draft, signed by Thomas Crowley and his legal advisors, I explained that it outlined strategies to alienate me legally and brand me as a conspirator. A plan, in his own handwriting, to sacrifice me to shield himself. Or by midday, they concluded the session. Dana gathered the papers, saying, "Thank you, Alex. Your testimony is pivotal. We'll notify you if we need further clarification, but this is a robust record." I exhaled, relief washing over me. It felt surreal to sit there, recounting my family's darkest machinations under oath. Walking down the courthouse steps, I resisted the urge to look back. Each stride felt lighter. I'd faced my uncle in the most formal arena imaginable, and I'd told the truth. That evening, back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and gazed out at the rain-streaked windows. I knew there were more battles to fight, court hearings, appeals, media spin campaigns, but for now, I allowed myself a moment of quiet pride. I had spoken my truth under oath, and no one could take that away from me. In the days following my deposition, I sensed the shifting tides. Crowley's lawyers filed motions to challenge the admissibility of key exhibits, arguing chain of custody issues, and alleging I might have tampered with electronic records. At the same time, local business reporters began calling, probing for quotes. I declined every request, wanting to maintain the integrity of the ongoing investigation. Late one evening, my cell phone rang. The number was blocked. My pulse quickened as I answered. "Alex Navarro?" a low voice asked, and we, "Yes?" "I'm, let's say, a concerned party." The voice dripped faux concern. "You're playing with fire. My advice? Drop the fight. Think of your future, your career, your reputation. Your uncle can make things difficult for you." I recognized the threat beneath the polite tone. "Who is this?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "There are people who'd prefer you stay silent," the voice continued. "Don't underestimate what your uncle can do." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, anger and fear mingling. They were trying to intimidate me, but I refused to be cowed. I texted Jorge. "Got a warning call. They're scared." He replied immediately, "Stay strong. Document it. We'll use it." The next morning, I forwarded the voicemail to Dana Ruiz and Carter Nguyen. They assured me that any threat could be used as evidence of witness intimidation, strengthening both civil and criminal cases. Meanwhile, Uncle Thomas's empire teetered. Crowley Resorts announced an abrupt restructuring, replacing several executives and hiring a PR agency. Their public statement blamed unexpected market conditions and asserted their commitment to transparency. I knew it was a smokescreen. That Friday, Matilda arranged a secure viewing at the bank's evidence room. Carter, Peter, and I reviewed all the materials again: emails, vehicle logs, bank statements, and internal memos. Each document was catalogued meticulously. As we watched surveillance footage of a midnight removal of boxes from the Bellingham resort, boxes that matched the shipping containers Tom Reynolds had accessed, we realised the scope of the cover-up was vaster than we'd imagined. "Those boxes contained archived audit files," Carter said gravely. "They tried to destroy years of evidence." Peter tapped his pen. "We'll add obstruction of justice charges. This is beyond fraud. It's systematic destruction of records." I felt a mix of vindication and dread. My uncle had tried to erase the proof, but by risking everything, I'd uncovered the full extent of his actions. That evening, I walked through Seattle's Pioneer Square, the historic brick buildings bathed in lamplight. I thought of all the people affected by Crowley's deception: employees who lost bonuses, small vendors stiffed on invoices, guests misled by luxury promises. Their trust had been exploited. My phone buzzed. A text from Assistant AG Ruiz. "Judge granted injunction. Asset freeze upheld. Next court hearing set for Wednesday. Thank you for your courage." I exhaled, relief mingling with resolve. The legal machinery was in motion, and the walls were closing in on Crowley Resorts. As I headed home, I felt a profound shift within me. I was no longer merely fighting for my own survival. I was part of a larger battle for accountability and justice. My uncle's empire was built on fragile lies, and now those lies would shatter piece by piece, revealing the truth for all to see. Wednesday arrived with a glimmer of sunshine breaking through the usual Pacific Northwest overcast, an ironic flourish for a day that would shine a harsh light on Crowley Resorts. I reached the King County Courthouse early, dressed in a navy blazer and crisp shirt, feeling the familiar nervous excitement. Inside, reporters clustered near the entrance, snapping photos as I passed. I avoided their lenses, heading straight to the secured courtroom on the 3rd floor. The bench was packed. My uncle's legal team on the left, the bank's attorneys, and Assistant AG Ruiz on the right. Judge McAllister, an imposing figure with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, presided over the hearing. Carter and Matilda sat beside me, offering quiet nods of encouragement. "Counsel," Judge McAllister began, "we are here to address the preliminary injunction and asset freeze requested by Seabourn Bank against Crowley Resorts. Briefs have been submitted on both sides. I will hear argument first from the bank." Matilda stood gracefully. "Your Honour, the evidence demonstrates that Crowley Resorts engaged in deliberate misrepresentation of its assets, shifting funds, falsifying records, and hiding documents. The guarantor, Mr. Navarro, possesses first-hand knowledge and irrefutable documentation. Without immediate relief, Crowley risks further dissipation of assets, rendering any eventual judgment meaningless." Carter added, "We request maintenance of the asset freeze and an order compelling Crowley Resorts to produce all financial records within 7 days. Next, Crowley's lead counsel, Sylvia Hargrove, rose. Her tailored suit and calm demeanour belied the tension in her voice. "Your Honour, while we acknowledge past errors in financial reporting, Crowley Resorts is undertaking comprehensive restructuring to address these issues. We contend the bank's requests are overly broad, unduly disruptive to business operations, and based on unverified allegations." She paused, letting the courtroom absorb her words. "Further, Mr. Navarro's testimony, while compelling, is tainted by personal animus toward his uncle. This court should deny the bank's motion and allow Crowley Resorts to implement its internal corrective measures." I tensed, expecting a direct attack on me. Instead, she focused on procedural objections and painting Crowley's plans as cooperative. Judge McAllister frowned. "Thank you," he intoned. Then he turned to me. "Mr. Navarro, the court would like to hear from you. Please stand." My heart pounded as I rose. The room fell silent. The judge's piercing gaze met mine. "You have signed as guarantor, Mr. Navarro. Can you summarize why you believe the freeze is necessary?" I took a breath, meeting the judge's eyes. "Your Honour, I have first-hand evidence showing intentional asset transfers designed to mislead lenders, internal emails about offshore accounts, and a plan drafted by Mr. Crowley's legal advisors to scapegoat me as guarantor. Unless these assets are frozen, Crowley Resorts will divert funds offshore or liquidate properties, leaving no recourse for the bank or myself." The courtroom remained hushed as I handed my folder to the bailiff. Judge McAllister perused it, pausing over the stamped contingency plan, his brow furrowing. He looked up. "Mr. Crowley," he said, addressing my uncle's empty counsel table, "this court takes allegations of fraud and record destruction seriously. Given the credible evidence and testimony, the motion for preliminary injunction and asset freeze is hereby granted. Crowley Resorts must produce all financial records to Seabourn Bank within 7 days, and all assets currently frozen shall remain under court supervision pending further order." A murmur rippled through the room. Matilda exhaled and squeezed my hand. Outside, reporters clamoured, but I felt a calm resolve settle over me. I'd won this battle, momentarily securing the fortress against my uncle's next moves. As I left the courtroom, Carter and Matilda flanked me. "Great job," Carter said quietly. "This will send a strong signal to his board and investors." Matilda nodded. "You were powerful under oath, Alex. Justice has taken a significant step today." I nodded, glancing back at the courthouse steps. My uncle's empire had been checked, its facade cracked, but the war was far from over. Still, walking out into the Pacific sunshine, I felt, perhaps for the first time, truly free. The morning after the injunction felt surreal. Dawn broke over Seattle with a rare splash of blue sky, as though the city itself celebrated our victory. I arrived at the office of the Bradley Integrity Foundation, my fledgling non-profit dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, and settled into my chair, running through emails. Within hours, Matilda's memo appeared in my inbox. The bank and the state AG had filed for contempt charges against Crowley Resorts for missing deadlines on record production. By mid-morning, news outlets picked up the story. On my phone, I saw headlines: Guarantor topples resort empire, family feud sparks fraud probe, and Seattle nephew turns whistleblower. I sighed, torn between vindication and unease. My face stared back at me in dozens of articles. My private battle, now public drama. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Dana Ruiz, the assistant AG. She carried a file heavy with new developments. "Alex," she said quietly, closing the door, "we've traced significant fund transfers from offshore accounts into a shell corporation registered in your uncle's name. We need your authorization to subpoena any entities connected to him personally. With your permission, we can extend the investigation beyond Crowley Resorts to include all related companies." I nodded. "Do it. I want every shell, every hidden account uncovered." Dana gave a respectful nod. "Understood. We'll move immediately." Late afternoon, I returned home to find a letter taped to my door. It bore no return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside lay a single sheet. "Meet me at Harborview, rooftop, midnight. Usual code." The usual code meant Thomas Reed, the former executive assistant who'd quietly defected months earlier. He'd offered help once. I'd hesitated. Now, with the case gaining momentum, I felt I needed his testimony. That night, I slipped into Harborview Resort under dim lights. The rooftop terrace was empty except for Thomas Reed, who waited near a plant wall. He looked gaunt, but resolute. "Alex," he greeted softly, "you did well today." I exhaled. "I need your help again. Dana just told me they're subpoenaing related entities, but I suspect there are more hidden documents, ledgers that never left your old office. Do you still have access?" Thomas hesitated. "They've been cleaning out my old desk at Harborview, but I copied files to my personal drive before they could seize everything." He pulled out a small encrypted hard drive. "This has detailed records of joint ventures and internal memos showing profit-shifting schemes. But it also names board members complicit in the deceptive practices." My pulse quickened. If we hand this to Dana, it could broaden the investigation and expose a network of insiders. Thomas nodded gravely. "I know the risks, but they demanded loyalty even when they knew it was wrong." It's time the truth came out. We parted with a firm handshake and I tucked the drive into my coat. Walking back, the city lights shimmered on Elliott Bay, each reflection a reminder that corruption today could be unveiled tomorrow. The next morning, I met Dana at the AG's office. She stared at the drive with awe. "This could open new avenues. Criminal charges for corporate racketeering, conspiracy involving executives beyond your uncle. Are you prepared for the fallout?" I met her gaze steadily. "I am. Let the full scope of wrongdoing come to light." As the drive changed hands, I felt a profound shift. I had moved from guarantor to architect of accountability. The fight would intensify, powerful figures would resist, threats would increase, but I was ready. For every hidden ledger uncovered, for every lied-to investor, for every employee deceived, justice moved one step closer. And in the quiet aftermath of that decision, I realized I was no longer just Alex Navarro, the wronged nephew. I was Alex Navarro, the catalyst for truth, determined to dismantle the entire web of deceit, brick by brick. Winter settled over Seattle with a bite in the air that reminded me how far we'd come and how much was still at stake. Crowley Resort's contempt hearing was scheduled for the following week, but before that, the Attorney General needed to sift through the new material Thomas Reed provided. The cloud of anticipation hung over me like a storm front. Every morning brought fresh updates and new subpoenas. That Thursday, I received a secure call from Assistant AG Dana Ruiz. "Alex, we've located 2 additional accounts in the Cayman Islands linked to Crowley Holdings," she reported. "We're drafting mutual legal assistance requests and coordinating with international authorities. There's one more thing. Your uncle has filed a protective order against you, alleging harassment and invasion of privacy. It's an obvious stall tactic, but we need your instructions on how to proceed." My jaw tightened. He was desperate enough to try to entangle me in frivolous litigation. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Counter it immediately. We'll file a motion to dismiss his order and seek sanctions for bad faith. His protective order is an attempt to intimidate me and derail the investigation." She paused, concern softening her tone. "This will escalate things quickly. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I have to be," I said. "He won't stop until he's cornered. Let's corner him faster." That afternoon, I met with my foundation's board, my brother Jorge among them. We reviewed projections for whistleblower support and discussed how the escalating legal battle might affect our grant recipients. The foundation's office hummed with energy, case managers on calls, new applications rolling in from employees across the region. In the midst of corporate turmoil, people needed help. Jorge caught my eye over the layout of our quarterly newsletter draft and gave a sympathetic nod. He'd sacrificed a weekend to help me organise confidential donations for our defence fund. I pressed my lips together, grateful for his loyalty. Later, at my apartment, I opened a letter from Crowley's attorneys. They demanded I cease all communications with any current or former employees of Crowley Resorts, labelling it unwarranted and harassing. Below, they threatened hefty fines if I disobeyed. I slid the paper onto my desk and exhaled. Desperate people make desperate threats. True to our plan, Carter filed our response the next morning. A motion to dismiss with a request for sanctions. We included documentation of their bad faith tactics, omitting records, moving funds offshore, and now this subpoena-heavy harassment. It felt vindicating to see the paperwork go through, but I braced for retaliation. That same evening, as I walked home from a foundation board meeting, I spotted a dark sedan tailing me down 2nd Avenue. My heart raced. I ducked into a busy coffee shop and waited, pretending to read an article on my phone. The car paused outside, headlights off, engine idling. After 5 minutes, I slipped out another exit and lost them in the crowded streets. The message was clear. My uncle's reach extended even into the city's heart. I reported the incident to Dana, who arranged increased security detail whenever I travelled to court or the bank. Each step I took toward justice carried a price, but I refused to retreat. In fact, I felt more resolved than ever. That night, I sat by my window overlooking the lit skyline, sipping tea and reviewing the day's developments. New subpoenas, protective orders filed and countered, international investigations initiated. The legal net was tightening around Crowley's network. While the chill of winter seeped into the glass, inside I felt a fierce warmth of purpose. Tomorrow would bring more hearings, more filings, but also more progress. As long as I held my ground, each piece of evidence and every ally, Matilda, Carter, Dania, Jorge, Tom, Julia, would carry us closer to dismantling the empire that once overshadowed my life. I set my mug down, squared my shoulders, and prepared for whatever came next. The morning of the contempt hearing arrived with frigid clarity. I wrapped my navy overcoat tight against the chill before stepping into my car and heading downtown. Reporters clustered outside the King County Courthouse again, but today I walked past them with purpose, nodding to Matilda and Carter as they emerged from the lobby. Inside the courtroom, Judge McAllister presided once more. Crowley's lead counsel, Sylvia Hargrove, sat flanked by two junior attorneys who looked weary. On my side were Carter, Matilda, and Assistant AG Dana Ruiz, her folder brimming with exhibits. I took my seat, feeling a mixture of anticipation and calm resolve. The hearing opened with Judge McAllister clarifying the motion. Crowley Resorts had failed to comply with the injunction's record production order. "Counsel for Crowley," he said, "explain your client's non-compliance." Sylvia rose, clearing her throat. "Your Honour, Crowley Resorts encountered unforeseen technical issues retrieving data from older servers. We attempted to produce the files as directed, but some archive backups were corrupted. We request an extension to secure alternative data recovery solutions." Her argument sounded flimsy. Matilda leaned over and whispered, "They're stalling." Judge McAllister's gaze sharpened. Technical issues should have been anticipated when files were deliberately destroyed. "Counsel, produce evidence of your data recovery efforts, or I will find Crowley Resorts in contempt." Sylvia faltered and sank into her seat. Dana then stood. "Your Honour, we have evidence that Crowley's IT department not only failed to recover archives, but actively wiped several backup tapes after the freeze order took effect. Exhibit 23 includes internal logs showing deletion timestamps. Tape a 1 through a 4 occurred hours after the court's injunction notice." She handed the judge a binder. "We move to hold Crowley Resorts and its principal officers in criminal contempt for willful destruction of evidence." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge McAllister leafed through the logs, his expression grave. "Is this accurate?" he asked Sylvia. Sylvia's eyes darted. "We are investigating the matter, Your Honour. There may have been rogue actors within the IT team acting without executive knowledge." Dana countered. "Your own internal emails, Exhibit 24, show Mr. Crowley personally urging IT to swift action before auditors arrived. This is not rogue. It is sanctioned." The judge closed the binder with a decisive thud. "I find Crowley Resorts willfully in contempt of this court's order. I hereby impose a daily fine of $50,000 until full compliance is achieved, and I am referring the matter to the county prosecutor for potential criminal contempt charges against those responsible. This session is adjourned." As the gavel fell, a palpable sense of victory filled our side of the room. Carter gave me a quick nod. Matilda allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Outside, cameramen scrambled to catch our reaction, but I focused on the outcome. The court had recognised the seriousness of Crowley's misconduct and was holding them accountable. Later that afternoon, Dana updated me. We've secured a temporary receivership to oversee Crowley Resort's record retrieval and ensure compliance. The county prosecutor will investigate contempt findings for potential misdemeanor charges. Her words felt like another milestone. Driving home, I reflected on how far this had come. From a frightened nephew steered into a bank investigator's office to a guarantor wielding airtight evidence in court, every step had been fraught with risk. Yet here I was, watching a flawed empire crumble under the weight of its own deception. That evening, I sat by my desk and drafted a letter to the Bradley Integrity Foundation's board, reporting our progress and urging continued support for whistleblowers. My phone buzzed with a message from Julia Murray. Ready to testify further if needed. Thank you. I paused, then texted back. Thank you, Julia. You're helping build a better future. Outside, Seattle's lights glittered against the dark water of Elliott Bay. I closed my laptop, feeling a quiet pride. The fight was not over, but with each hearing, each protective order, each witness coming forward, the truth shone brighter, and no one could hide it any longer. The week after the contempt ruling felt like a turning tide. Crowley Resort's board convened emergency meetings to chart a path forward, and I watched public filings show their stock plummet. Meanwhile, the Bradley Integrity Foundation received a surge of inquiries from whistleblowers emboldened by our success. Every email was a reminder that this fight extended far beyond my family's drama. On a damp Thursday morning, I received a call from Assistant A.G. Dana Ruiz. Alex, we've got an update. Your uncle's legal team just filed for bankruptcy protection under Chapter 11. They're attempting to shield the remaining assets, she reported. I frowned. That could complicate the criminal contempt proceedings. How do we respond? Dana sighed. We're petitioning to lift the automatic stay for matters related to criminal contempt and fraud. The bankruptcy court has discretion, but given the severity of his misconduct, deliberate asset concealment and contempt, it's likely they'll grant our request. I thanked her and hung up. Bankruptcy felt like one more stalled tactic, but the law had more arrows in its quiver. Later that day, I joined Matilda and Carter at the bank's downtown office. We spread out the court documents, the Chapter 11 petition, our motion to lift the stay, and the updated timeline of criminal charges. Carter outlined our strategy. 1. File in bankruptcy court to lift the stay for contempt and criminal fraud charges. 2nd, coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure federal counts aren't derailed by the bankruptcy. Mundram. Monitor any additional filings for offshore transfers or attempts to move assets. As we worked, Matilda glanced at the headlines on her phone. Crowley Resorts Files. Chapter 11, Whistleblowers Evidence Prompts Bankruptcy Move. She tapped the screen. Public sentiment remains supportive of you, Alex. The perception is that this is a spectacle by a desperate man. I nodded, steeling myself. Good. The more transparent this is, the harder it is for him to hide. That evening, I attended a small gathering at the foundation offices, a fundraising reception with corporate ethics leaders and potential donors. As I mingled, several attendees greeted me with gratitude and curiosity about our work. One executive leaned in and whispered, "Your case has inspired our compliance team to revisit internal whistleblower channels." "Thank you," I smiled, humbled by how a personal struggle had sparked broader change. Still, my mind kept returning to the next court date, Bankruptcy judges, criminal referrals, and the looming possibility that my uncle would flee as his empire unravelled. 2 nights later, my phone lit up with an urgent text from Tom Reynolds. "He's gone. Private jet left Painfield at 3 this morning. No forwarding address." My heart stalled. Crowley had reportedly chartered a Gulf Stream, likely bound for a jurisdiction without extradition treaties. If he escaped, the contempt and criminal cases would lose momentum, and victims would be left adrift. I dialed Dana without hesitation. "Dana, he's fled Washington. Flight records confirmed departure." She was silent for a moment. "We need an immediate alert to Interpol and a federal arrest warrant. I'll coordinate with the US Marshals." As the weight of his flight sank in, I felt a surge of anger and resolve. He thought he could run from accountability. He was wrong. That night, I sat at my desk, the city's lights casting reflections on my laptop screen. I drafted a letter to the bankruptcy court, opposing his stay motion and requesting the appointment of a Chapter 7 trustee if he didn't return within 72 hours. I forwarded it to Carter, then stepped away, hands trembling. I stared at a framed photograph on my shelf. Me, standing alongside Jorge at the foundation's grand opening, both of us smiling with hope. In that moment, I understood that this journey wasn't just about my uncle's downfall. It was about building a legacy of integrity that no amount of money or power could erase. I exhaled slowly, setting my jaw. He could flee, he could hide, but truth has a way of catching up, and I would make sure it did wherever he went. The next morning, the news of my uncle's flight hit every headline. Crowley, resorts founder, flees country. Nevada, jet escape raises questions of extradition. And whistleblower's fight goes global. I woke before dawn, unsettled by the thought that Thomas Crowley might slip through international cracks. I poured strong coffee and opened my laptop, reviewing overnight updates from Dana Ruiz and the US Marshals Service. Dana's email arrived at 7:05 a.m. "We have an Interpol red notice and a federal arrest warrant issued. US. Marshals are coordinating with authorities in Geneva, the likely destination based on flight data. I'll keep you posted." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Geneva sounded far away, and I worried that bureaucratic delays could let him vanish again. I typed a quick reply. "Please, expedite. Let me know if there's anything I can do to assist." Within an hour, Matilda called. "Alex, the bank's international counsel is drafting subpoenas for your uncle's Swiss accounts. We need to show Geneva's courts that the charges are legitimate and non-political. Can you provide affidavits detailing the fraud elements and chain of custody for evidence?" I agreed immediately. We arranged a secure video link with our Swiss attorneys for that afternoon. As I logged on, my binder of exhibits appeared on the screen. Emails about shell companies, logs of vehicle transfers, and, most damningly, the legal memo outlining his plan to scapegoat me. The Swiss counsel, a poised woman named Elise Fournier, assured me they'd file an emergency petition to freeze assets and detain him upon arrival. By midday, I felt a cautious hope. Perhaps he'd be arrested before he even touched down, but the threat remained. If he evaded Swiss police, extradition could take months, or be refused if he claimed political persecution. That afternoon, I headed to the Bradley Integrity Foundation's office to prepare the affidavits. Jorge and I worked side by side, translating key documents, notarizing pages, and ensuring every signature was properly witnessed. Our interns watched in awe as we assembled stacks of paper that represented years of wrongdoing and their promises of justice. As I stamped the final page, my phone buzzed again. Dana. He was apprehended during transit through Zurich. Swiss authorities confirmed identity via fingerprints. He's in custody at Zurich-Kloten Airport. Extradition paperwork has been filed with the Federal Office of Justice. A wave of relief washed over me. I slumped into my chair, exhausted but exhilarated. After months of fighting, the fugitive was caught. Now, the legal machinery would move to bring him home. That evening, the U.S. Attorney's Office held a press briefing outside the federal courthouse in Seattle. I attended quietly in the back row, Jorge and Matilda flanking me. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Holt announced the news. Thomas Crowley has been detained in Switzerland and will be extradited under the terms of the U.S.-Switzerland Treaty. He faces multiple federal charges, including bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. I felt a tug on my sleeve, journalists seeking comment. I shook my head, stepping aside. I didn't want personal attention overshadowing the case's significance. That corporate criminals could be held accountable no matter their power or connections. Later, as the press conference ended, Jorge put an arm around me. "You did it," he said softly. "He can't hide anymore." I nodded, glancing up at the courthouse's grand columns. It's not over until he's convicted, and until all those who enabled him face justice too. But today, we've shown that truth can outrun even the fastest jet. Walking away, I felt the burden lighten. Soon, the final hearings and trials would unfold. The web of lies my uncle had spun would unravel completely in the Seattle courtroom, where it all began. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a future beyond litigation, one where my foundation thrived, protecting whistleblowers and preventing this kind of betrayal again. And with that thought, I stepped forward into the cold night, ready for the final chapter. The late winter sun filtered weakly through my office window as I drafted the closing remarks for the upcoming sentencing hearing. After months of discovery, court battles, international manhunts, and witness testimonies, the moment of reckoning was at hand. The U.S. District Court in Seattle would convene next week to hear victim impact statements and determine restitution. I felt a calm determination as I reviewed the schedule. First, the prosecution's presentation of losses incurred by creditors, then my own statement as the principal guarantor and whistleblower. That afternoon, I met privately with Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Holt to finalise my remarks. He praised the impact my actions had on dismantling a sophisticated fraud scheme. "Your testimony saved the bank and countless employees and vendors from ruin," he said. "You also set a precedent that family ties don't shield criminal conduct." His words warmed me. All the sleepless nights and relentless pressure had served a greater purpose. As I walked back to the Bradley Integrity Foundation, I passed the old Harborview Resort, its facade worn after years of turmoil. A single blooming cherry tree outside the entrance stood in pale blossom. Unexpected beauty amid decay. I paused, remembering the first time I'd eavesdropped there, imagining that I was invisible. Now I stood openly, unafraid. That evening, I convened a small gathering of key allies in our foundation's conference room. Matilda Crowley, Carter Nguyen, Dana Ruiz, Jorge Tom Reynolds, and Julia Murray. Each had risked their careers or comfort to ensure the truth prevailed. We raised glasses of sparkling water in quiet celebration. Tom nodded, voice thick with emotion. I'm proud to have stood by you. Seattle needed someone like you. Julia added, You gave me the courage to speak up. Now I feel empowered to protect others. Their gratitude reminded me why I'd chosen this path. The next morning, I arrived at the federal courthouse early, dressed in a dark suit. Reporters and well-wishers lined the sidewalk. Many recognized me now not as the nephew, but as a champion of justice. I offered brief nods before entering the courtroom where Judge McAllister presided. The prosecution outlined the staggering scale of the fraud. Over $60 million misappropriated, dozens of employees laid off, and reputational harm to lenders and communities. Then came my turn. I stood, took a steadying breath, and addressed the court. Your Honour, what began as a gesture of family loyalty became a tool to conceal deceit. I was spared only by the belief that truth matters more than legacy. Standing here, I represent every employee who trusted in a lawful enterprise, every small vendor who extended credit in good faith, and every whistleblower too afraid to speak. My actions were not driven by vengeance, but by a fundamental duty to honesty. I hope this case sends a clear message. No one, no matter how powerful, lies without consequence. I returned to my seat as a hush fell. Then, one by one, other victims, supply chain owners, former Crowley employees, community leaders, delivered heartfelt statements. The judge listened intently, his expression solemn. A week later, Judge McAllister handed down the sentence. Thomas Crowley would serve 6 years in federal prison, pay restitution exceeding $40 million, and face an additional 3 years of supervised release. The court also mandated creation of a victims' compensation fund, to which my foundation would contribute pro bono administration services. As I stepped outside into the crisp air, Jorge met me with a proud smile. You changed the system, he said simply. Thank you. I looked at the courthouse steps, then at the gathering supporters. No, I replied, we changed the system. Together. Walking away, I felt the final weight lift. What began as a personal battle had transformed into a legacy of accountability, and as I re-entered the city's pulse, I knew that the story I'd written was not one of vengeance, but of redemption, both for myself and for every truth seeker who followed.